shouldn't be too bad today with the swells, but we have had good sized swells. I know I go over that quick. If you guys have questions, we answer them. But it should be good. All right. Stand by your gear, raise your hands over, right? Good.
Welcome everyone to a new video series where I just sort of do a video log of my dives that you all can follow along with. So lately I have really been getting into the craft of underwater cinematography, and I guess you could say these videos aren't just video logs of my dives, but also behind the scenes of my journey in learning that new skill. Throughout the video, you will see an overlay of my dive computer, so you can have a good frame of reference on how deep we get throughout the dive. In terms of conditions, we really do have good conditions. We have 40 to 50 feet of visibility. The water's a comfortable 84 degrees, and we do have a little bit of a current, as you guys can see at the surface. There's a lot more chop up top, but throughout the dive, we do run into areas where we are fighting a bit with the current. But it's still a beautiful day out here in the Keys, and we really couldn't do much better for our first dive. Now, you guys might notice I am kind of fiddling with my camera rig here at the beginning. I find that at the beginning I am still figuring out how to dial in my camera settings. This is probably my first dive with what will be my completed rig. I've done about 5 dives testing it out, and I think I got a good fit. Now it's just getting familiar with it. For those of you guys that are curious, I'm shooting on a Sony FX3, which I find to be the best compact camera system for my needs. I get incredible image quality out of such a small form factor. Now, right at the beginning of our dive, we get to depth, we get together as a group, and there's a stingray that we notice off in the corner, buried in the sand, kind of just lounging and relaxing. So that's the first thing I'm going to try and shoot. I'm going to get up close to him without trying to disturb him and get a couple pretty shots. Typically, when they're just relaxing like this, it doesn't make for super interesting footage, but it's still pretty and cool to see wildlife along the bottom. So today I'm diving with my buddy AJ, who you can see to my left messing with his camera rig. This is officially his first dive using this camera rig setup, and he learned firsthand just how difficult it is maintaining buoyancy and trying to just dive with a huge rig like this. So it looks like somebody from our group up ahead spotted an interesting critter, and it's really difficult to communicate underwater. We use a lot of hand signs to communicate what we're seeing, and usually banging on something is how we'll get somebody's attention because the sound carries far, but obviously we can't talk. So she was pointing out right here what looks like a little eel. At first, when I was underwater, I thought it was a spotted eel, but now looking at the footage, I'm not 100% sure what kind of eel this is, but still a really cool find, and this is why I like having a group of experienced divers, because you end up finding a lot more. Now, one of the cool things on this part of Molasses Reef is you have a few pass-throughs that you'll get guided through if you go with a guide. I want to be honest, pass-throughs are really challenging. You can see that it becomes a really tight, narrow fit, but I like doing them because, as you'll see in a minute, there are tons of little fish hiding in there. And sometimes you'll get surprised with some unique finds, which we'll get to a little bit later in this dive. So as I exit the pass-through, I ended up hitting my light on one of the rocks, and it's still getting familiar with the rig. It is a lot wider than just my body, so that's just something I need to be mindful of in my dives going forward. But double checking, I didn't knock it hard enough to even scratch the glass at the front of the light, so that's good. These lights were not cheap. So swimming up to me right now is a parrotfish. You'll see a ton of parrotfish out here, and they have very striking colors. They come in a whole rainbow of colors, and if you hear the cracking underwater, that's actually parrotfish all throughout the reef munching on coral. It really is a crazy sound to hear. And sound travels so far underwater that you just hear thousands of parrotfish just munching on the coral and cracking it with their beaks. And it's a really soothing sound. So as we continue through this section of Molasses Reef, we reach our second pass-through. With these pass-throughs, we typically form a line for anybody who wants to do them, which I really don't recommend you try pass-throughs until you nail your buoyancy and you know you're not going to be kicking at the bottom of the floor or having to grab onto the top of the coral or the cavern. They're fun, but they are a little bit challenging if you are new to diving. So just make sure you have good buoyancy control before you pass through. I also like to hang back and let other divers get plenty far through the cavern before I make my way through these pass-throughs, just because I don't want to get stuck behind somebody who's kicking me with their fins. Now at the start of the pass-through, you see this group of fish using it as shelter. This is one of the cool things that you'll see when you're looking up under the coral. You'll see a lot of the more common fish throughout the reef in these caverns or under the coral, but sometimes you'll have unique finds or you'll find some bigger fish. But generally it's the common fish. But as I make my way out of the pass-through, the guide points to a little moray eel that he found sticking his head out. This was a cool little find. And honestly, this is usually where I see them sticking their head out. He shows his little unhinging jaw for me as if he wants to try and eat my camera. So that was a really cool shot to get. And then as I get out of the pass-through, I realize there's a couple divers behind me, and I wanted to kind of get their reaction to seeing the moray eel, see if maybe it surprised them or get a little bit of excitement. It is really cool how everybody kind of points out interesting things to one another. I really love that, and I think that makes the whole group experience really special. Now, throughout the dive, I'm trying to look up under the coral. Anytime I see like movement, I'm trying to figure out what I'm looking at and just kind of watching for any of those interesting critters. Basically, I just don't want to be that diver that completely misses something interesting because I was just looking at the floor the whole time. Now, as we continue on to the next section of the reef, I really want to show you guys why I have this massive setup for underwater cinematography. You see, underwater you lose a bunch of color, especially the deeper you go, light just can't travel as far. But with the footage that I get out of this camera and the lights, I'm able to bring back a lot of those colors. we're relatively shallow, so the sun's light is able to keep a lot of these colors, but it really does get more and more blue, and you really lose the reds and a lot of the colors in between red and blue the deeper you go. So you remember earlier in the video how I mentioned parrotfish come in all kinds of colors? Well, here we have a beautiful red and green parrotfish munching away at some coral. These fish are not only beautiful, but they really are incredible because they have these insanely hard beaks that crush the corals and eventually turn it into sand. Yep, a lot of the sand in the ocean comes from parrotfish poop. Bet that's a fun fact you didn't want to learn on this video. So at this point in the dive, the current really starts ripping, and we all find ourselves fighting to move through the reef. And while everyone in the group is fighting to get any distance, I ended up getting distracted by a barracuda swimming behind us. Honestly, the pass by was cool, but that shot was definitely not worth having to fight the current to catch up to the group. Fortunately, the reef gives us a small reprieve from the current as we make it to our third pass-through. Now, I wouldn't say this is the most exciting pass-through. It's not particularly long, with some fish hiding in the corner. But as I exit, I'm pretty excited to see a queen angelfish, and this fish is really beautiful. I mean, I always end up mesmerized by the crown on top of their heads. And the only way I can really describe it is it's just like looking at the night sky when it's really dark out, you have no other lights, and you're just seeing nothing but bright stars. Now, right about here is where I experience the worst of the current. Like, as soon as I turned the corner from this little protected coral patch, it just felt like I hit a wall, and I am just kicking to make any kind of distance. Fortunately, the current came in kind of like waves, and eventually I get a small little break, but it's really kicking back and forth. Now, at this point in the video, I am sure you've had moments where you don't see many fish around, and it sorta can feel like the reef is lifeless. I know that's something I feel at points in my dives, but then this crazy thing happens. As soon as I turn the corner here, I am met with a pulse of light, with hundreds of fish coming out from the corals, circling, and I end up capturing one of my favorite wide shots from this trip. It really just blows my mind how quickly animals can just sort of show up while you're diving. I feel like when you're new to diving, your first instinct when you're met with an empty reef is to try and quickly swim around to another section, just trying to find all the wildlife. But through my experience, I have learned that the reef can change in an instant. Like, literally, you can see how fast the fish scatter behind me as this barracuda swims out in front of me. Now we're getting to the halfway point in our dive, and as we make our way across this kind of like open field, I'd call it underwater, I feel a little bit of anxiousness because I've had my heart set on seeing a few animals this trip. One in particular that frequents these waters is an eagle ray. If you've seen Finding Nemo, it is the school instructor stingray with all the beautiful spots. And I really do want to see one. I've come to the Keys so many times and haven't had the opportunity to actually see one. So that is something I'm really keeping an eye out for. And obviously, I'm excited to see any sort of sharks. I'm definitely set up more to find the bigger animals. So right now at at this point in the dive, I sort of felt like my mask was fogging up. And for those of you that don't dive, you flush water out of your mask just by blowing air out of your nose. The only problem I have is my mustache tends to get in the way of the seal and water leaks through. So it takes a little bit of effort to just make sure all the water is clear from the mask as it starts to refill. But as soon as I clear my mask, another parrotfish swims by, and I don't know why, but specifically this colored parrotfish makes me think of that old children's book, The Rainbow Fish. I don't even think in that book it was a parrotfish, but just something about that blue reminds me of that book, and I don't know how many people read it, or if I'm showing my age, or whatnot, but yeah, whenever I see those light blue parrotfish, I think of that children's book. So you can see the boat kind of bobbing in the distance. At this point, we're at the halfway point. We're trying to stay relatively close to the ship, and we're just navigating the reef just right outside of where the ship is. And I'm looking and trying to find whatever I can in the crevices, maybe find some lobster or some kind of interesting fish. Unfortunately, I'm not really having much luck with that, but it's still good to check all of the little crevices because you never know what you're going to find. So as we're navigating the reef around the boat, we are really just kind of pushing against the current. The reason for this is we can kind of just drift back to the line of the boat when we're ready to surface. So putting in this work now will pay off in the end, but at this point in the dive, it is really work to get some distance. we're coming up on our 4th pass through, and I decided this time that I would just kind of swim over because I wanted to keep my eye out on the entire reef. But I do want to give you guys a little perspective on what this pass through kind of looked like. And we got another diver. She's going through the pass through. It's just a small little ledge. So right here, I noticed the light's rays looking beautiful behind AJ, and I grab this shot, and I find it really striking the way the sun's rays are shining through the water, and he's coming down into the reef, and I really like those shots. They're beautiful shots, and I think they give you a great perspective of what it's like on the reef with all the fish in the background, and I really like these shots. One thing that I'm kind of learning with underwater cinematography is it's about trying to show scale and perspective, and that is really what I am practicing, is how to get shots that really show what it's like to be underwater, and then that can translate to kind of more narrative work. So right here, we're kind of going through a canyon, and I thought this was really cool to kind of show the narrow channels and passageways where fish can hide, and just kind of how we navigate the reefs in interesting ways. As I exit this channel, I make sure to check the corner because there's a little shelf where critters might be hiding, and with this particular corner, I didn't find like any eels or any big schools of fish, but it's still cool looking and double checking. Usually I'll hit record before I turn the corner in case there's something there that maybe wants to leave once I get there. So what's really hard to capture with my wide lens is these schools of little yellow fish, but I do find the way they kind of dance around the reefs very pleasing, and it's calming, and I like it, and it's fun to kind of swim through it. So up ahead, I notice a large school of fish hanging out under the shelf of this coral patch, and what I like to do is investigate these a little bit, because sometimes hidden in that large school of fish will be other kind of unique finds. Like sometimes I've seen Goliath groupers in these groups, which are these just massive human-sized fish, or sometimes you might see a lionfish kind of hiding amongst them. Luckily, we haven't seen any lionfish on this dive. They are a invasive species that wreak havoc here, and luckily a lot of divers have done a lot to mitigate how bad the invasive species is here. We actually host an annual lionfish competition with a pretty big cash prize, and it's a huge event that I plan on covering next year, and I want to shoot a mini doc on one of the teams. So that is part of why I am practicing and figuring out how to get my rig configured perfectly, because that's a story I really want to tell, and it's awesome and exciting. So no lionfish here, which is good, but yeah, didn't mean to go off on that tangent. Looking at another school of fish, just seeing what we see. They're all just kind of chilling and hanging out. It is kind of crazy how wildlife underwater can just be unfazed by our presence. I know shooting wildlife above ground, it's a completely different experience. There's no way I would be getting close to any animals like this on land. And now we're kind of just hanging out, getting ready to do our safety stop. We have our same stingray from the beginning. This time he's turned around and I can get that front head-on shot, which, look at that, he's hiding so well. It is quite funny how they hide with just barely any sand covering them. And then one of the things that frustrates me with this giant rig is people see me and they immediately swim to whatever it is I'm looking at. If they see me stopped for a long time pointing the camera at anything, I'll usually get drive-bys like that diver right there. It is kind of crazy how that happens. He wasn't even part of our group, you may have noticed, but he rushed over to what I was filming. So right now we are just hanging out, kind of slowly getting ready to do our safety stop. Now, if you aren't a diver, a safety stop just kind of lets your body decompress so that you don't get massively sick or die when you surface, because you got to reacclimate to different atmospheres. Typically, we do our safety stops between 20 and 15 feet. Luckily, modern technology makes it so you don't have to think about it too much. So kind of just floating around the 15 feet mark, seeing what we see from up here. And yeah, this has been a fun dive. And I thank you all for coming on this experience with me. Hopefully you found it interesting and you had fun, because I know I did. Going forward, I plan on trying to make video logs like this, and I did go back and forth on whether or not to voice over the video log or to just let it be 45 minutes of ambiance underwater. I am open to feedback on it, but I decided to kind of do a voiceover and log while it was somewhat fresh in my mind what I was thinking, what I was experiencing while underwater. But once again, thank you all for coming along on this dive, and hopefully we'll see you in the next one. This entire dive trip was a total of 6 dives that I will be sharing over the next few weeks. So if you aren't, subscribe, and you will hit that bell notification and all that jazz to let YouTube know you want to watch more of these videos and maybe hear more of my voice or not. Just kind of depends, but yeah, I'm running out of things to say, and these safety stops are boring. You can see me just floating at 10 feet for the next couple minutes as we slowly surface and wrap up the dive. But that's it. We're leaving. Hope you guys have a great day.